was a kid, Aladdin was my favorite Disney movie. I felt like even though I liked Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, this was the first Disney movie for boys. It had action, it had sword fights, it had lava, it had flying around on magic carpets, it had monsters, it had comedy, it had a lot of adult jokes that I actually sort of understood. It had kick-ass songs, it was just awesome. But I will admit, as I get older, that novelty seems to wear off a bit. Unlike Beauty and the Beast that gets better and better as I get older, I do see more and more the flaws of Aladdin. Okay, well let's look at the story. Aladdin is a thief trying to get by on the streets. He comes across a princess named Jasmine who's trying to get away from the palace to make a life for her own. But he gets captured by a sorcerer named Jafar and gets manipulated into searching for a magic lamp. Here, he comes across a flying carpet, and of course, the genie. Do I even need to say who voiced him?
Hello, Aladdin. Nice to have you on the show. Can we call you Al, or maybe just Din? Or how about Laddie? Sounds like, here, boy. Come on, Laddie.
So he goes back to town using one of his wishes to turn himself into a prince. This allows him the possibility to marry the princess, but Jafar won't let it happen. He tries to kill Aladdin and take the lamp away so he can use the genie for his own diabolical powers. You get your sword fight, giant monsters, action, comedy, all that good stuff. So what is it about Aladdin that does or doesn't work? Well, a lot of the time, it's sort of the same thing. Aladdin is very modern. Even Agrabah looks much more like Vegas than it does an Arabian city. Of course, Robin Williams' jokes, while funny, all come from a way that current people talk and even movies that haven't been made by this time period. In fact, they didn't even know what movies were back then. So there's a lot of breaking the fourth wall jokes and, of course, a lot of modern-day talk.
I'm in the mood to help you, dude.
Well, most of it modern. Aladdin and Jasmine, though they don't quote as many movie stars as Williams does, still seem out of their time period too. They seem more like Gen Xers than they do the product of an Arabian village. Jafar is pretty cool, and the Sultan is enjoyably stupid. But most of it doesn't seem to take place once upon a time, but more around the time that maybe Shrek lives in. In fact, yeah, Shrek probably stole a lot from this movie, didn't they? So does that make Aladdin bad? Not necessarily. If anything, it makes it unique. It's a very different take that Disney was trying to do, and apparently it really paid off. The jokes Robin Williams makes is funny, and despite the fact that it doesn't look like Arabia, it still looks great. The colors in this movie are just wonderful, as well as the lighting. On top of that, what I think is really important is that Aladdin and Jasmine do have chemistry. Yeah, I know, it's another 3-day romance and then suddenly they get married, but you know what? You believe they're in love. They do have conversations, they do talk about their problems, and they do try to help each other out. Okay, it's not Beauty and the Beast, but it works okay. The songs are still awesome. It's still Alan Menken, and it's still those incredibly catchy beats. At times, some of the modern talk can get a little annoying, like when Aladdin tries to act cool or Gilbert Gottfried yells some more, but I think it still has the same Disney heart, and it is very entertaining. So while I don't like it as much as I did when I was a kid, I still do like it. There's still a lot of things to admire, a lot of things to laugh at, and a lot of things to hum after leaving the theater. As long as you know what you're getting yourself into, chances are you'll have a pretty good time. And now we come to the big one, The Lion King, the highest grossing 2D animated film of all time. When this movie came out, every kid was nuts. We were humming all the songs, we were reenacting all the scenes, we were talking about all the characters. It was just a gigantic flick. So, is it bad to say I think it's kind of overrated? Okay, just hear me out. While I don't think it's bad, I don't think it's the strongest of Disney's works either. I don't even know if I necessarily put it in the top 5. But that doesn't mean there aren't some very impressive things about it, or that the film as a whole doesn't work. Well, here, let's start from the beginning. We start with the birth of the new Prince Simba. Do I even need to tell you how they celebrate this? So young Simba is shown around by King Mufasa how to rule as a good king. But his uncle Scar is angry because he was next in line to be king. So he constantly tries to set traps with the hyenas to kill him off. But Mufasa is always there to save him, so there's only one logical choice: kill Mufasa. This leads to a very intense and very well done chase scene with a bunch of wildebeest. Scar sees his opportunity and throws him off a cliff. Simba, thinking that he started the stampede, feels incredibly guilty and Scar advises him to run away. Why he doesn't just kill him right there, I don't know. But Simba goes into exile and comes across a team known as Timon and Pumbaa. They tell him that it's okay to run away from your problems and start a new life over. And that's exactly what he does. He spends most of his years growing up with the two and decides never to go back. That is until his old childhood friend shows up and tells him that things are terrible back at home. And since he is the rightful king, he's the only one that can go back and make things better. But Simba doubts himself, thinking he still killed his father, until he gets a vision in the sky. His father says nut up, and Simba decides to go back home and fight his uncle. And you know the drill. Big climax, comic relief, get some laughs, and then the final showdown between the two of them. Okay, so what problems do I have with a story that actually seems almost adult? And that is stole from the most famous of adult plays. Well, let's get to my biggest problem with the film. The message. Actually, the message I really like, and I think it's a very adult message. I especially like it when he talks to Rafiki about it.
Ow! Jeez, what was that for?
It doesn't matter. It's in the past.
Yeah, but it still hurts.
Yes, the past can hurt. But the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it.
Now that's really clever, and I'm totally behind that. What I'm not behind is that when he does go back to face his fears start to win. And everything he was taught before suddenly is working against him. Nobody even gets behind him. Nobody's standing up for him. That is until it turns out he didn't commit the crime that he thought he did. So I guess the moral of the story is never take responsibility for what you've done, because nobody will be behind you unless it turns out you didn't really do it. Yeah, how is this confronting his past? It's a past that never happened, so it doesn't matter. And even when he thought it did happen, the movie didn't support him. Almost as if the film was saying if he did accidentally kill his father, he deserves to die. Look, nobody's on his side until he comes out and says, haha, wasn't me. And I'm sorry, that's a serious flaw. If you think it's something that just my overanalyzing adult mind thought of, no, I was thinking of this as a kid too. This film didn't teach me to come forward with my mistakes and to take the responsibility for it. It taught me to convince people that I didn't do the mistake, because that way I'll have a happy ending. Okay, so good intention gets totally botched. What else don't I like? Well, the songs. Yeah, I know, but I'm sorry, I don't like these songs. Well, I take it back. Be Prepared is awesome. Circle of Life is good. Though I think a lot of that is more Hans Zimmer's orchestrations. Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Hate it. I Can't Wait to Be King? Hate it. Hakuna Matata? Holy fuck balls, I hate this song. I hated it when it first came out. I was boggled by the fact that everybody was actually singing this. It's annoying. While I was constantly humming Be Prepared at school, all the other kids were constantly singing Hakuna Matata.
I'm surrounded by idiots.
On top of that, big shock, I think Matthew Broderick is pretty bland. Jonathan Taylor Thomas is a little bit too, but to be fair, he's a kid, and he really does sell those crime scenes. The villain, well, good, is a little too simplistic. I don't know, he seems so smart and intelligent, but then when he takes over, he seems like a little child. That just sucks out all the dignity and likability that you have for a villain. It's like if Maleficent, after she got her way, suddenly started going nee 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 nee. And there's also details like how did the water come flowing back after Simba took over? Why did the weather get better? Why is it suddenly green? But that's Disney logic. I can't complain that hard about it. So okay, I've bitched about the movie long enough. What do I like about it? Well, it's big. I mean, friggin' big. If you can see this movie on the big screen, see it. When Scar's paw comes down for the first time, it's just massive. I actually remember somebody in the audience going, whoa! On top of that, the characters aren't great, but they're good. James Earl Jones as Mufasa is a great leader, Jeremy Irons is over the top as the villain, but he's still pretty enjoyable. The hyenas are funny, Rowan Atkinson has a few good puns here and there. I'm not a huge fan of Timon and Pumbaa, but I stomach them okay. They get a laugh every once in a while. And even though the message is sort of botched, I like the message it's trying to get across. But like I said, what makes this film good is just the size of it. And it doesn't just come from the animation, it does come from the story. It's a big story. Like I said, it's basically a kid version of Hamlet, but they don't sugarcoat it that much. They don't pull a Bambi's mom where she dies off screen. No, you see the body. That was a big thing for kids back then. To have a death scene right in the middle of a big action-packed moment was pretty unexpected for Disney. At least at that time. So overall, I do like it. I do wish some of the other Disney films got more attention and made more money, but that doesn't mean the original film is bad. It's a big film with a pretty big story and a pretty big message. I just have my own personal issues with them. It's a movie I was glad to see several times in the theater, and chances are when they re-release it again, I'll go and check it out a few more times. So Disney was producing some of the biggest hits the world has ever seen. The Little Mermaid, a lot of people saw. Beauty and the Beast, most people saw. Aladdin, everybody saw. And The Lion King was the highest grossing animated film at that time. What could possibly go wrong for Disney? Yeah. Yes, Pocahontas seems to be that snowball that started the avalanche of downward spiraling Disney animated films. It wasn't a big critical disappointment or even that big a financial disappointment, but nobody praised it like they praised the other Disney films, especially the general public. Not just adults, but even kids found the whole idea of telling the story of the Indian princess to be, well, not that interesting. And the 2D Disney animated films would never quite hit the record-breaking numbers that they did with Lion King, Aladdin, and so forth after this came out. So, is it as bad as everybody made it out to be? Let's look at the good stuff. First of all, you gotta give Disney credit for trying something pretty different with this. I mean, for a company that mostly based its animated films on fairy tales and pop cultural references, this was a very different turn. Even the look of the film is different. The soft, smooth lines are not really as prominent, and look, even the eyes have really shrunken down. The characters don't look like the typical Barbie and Ken stereotypes that you get in most Disney films. But I think people kinda miss that. I think there's just something so jarring when your last human characters look like this and then suddenly they look like this. But hey, a more adult look is fine if there's a more adult story. And that is not at all what this is. I'm not even gonna try and talk about the history aspect of this, cause trust me, there's no point. They made most of it up. But that wouldn't matter as much if it was done well. But pretty much what we have is the typical greedy white guy comes to take over the native land. A story that adults, and especially kids, have heard over and over and over in after-school specials. Are they right? Well, yeah, but can you find a new way of telling it? I think a lot of us don't see the purpose in watching a story if we already know exactly what's gonna happen and pretty much how you're going to tell it. Okay, let's get to the technicals here. Our main lead is Pocahontas. She's strong, free-spirited, and dull as a rock. Yeah, I'm sorry, she's just not that interesting. I mean, I know she does things that the other princesses don't do, but her actions are one thing, her personality is something different. And she's not bad, she's just not that fun to watch. The only person to be more boring is John Smith, played by Mel Gibson. Him and his crew come across the Native Americans and decide they want to take over their land, which leads to teaching the white idiots a new point of view, constant misunderstandings that of course result in capture and death, and an evil bad guy who refuses to listen and just wants gold, gold, gold. It's your classic Who's the Savage story, which like I said, wouldn't be bad if they could do something new with it. And for those thinking that this was one of the first films to try it, it's not. Like I said, this stuff was in countless after-school specials and TV shows and all sorts of things geared towards kids, so this was really nothing that unexpected. One of the biggest complaints at the time is that the animals don't talk. And at first, I kinda like it. I like a little mime, silent school stuff where you don't hear them talk and it's all in the expressions. But then, when you really think about it, this is a film about communicating with nature. Why don't the animals talk? If there's any Disney movie where it actually makes sense to hear the animals speak, this is it. But if they don't want to make them talk, that's fine. Maybe they're communicating with nature in another way. Like, you know, talking to the trees. Wait a minute! The trees can talk, but the animals can't? What sense does that make? Yeah, I don't get it either, and it was a pretty silly choice. Now wait a minute, didn't I say I was going to talk about the good things in this movie? Because there are a few. Most of us know Colors of the Wind, and even though it's preachy, it's still a pretty decent song. I really like Savages, even though the lyrics at times are a little goofy. Another thing that's really cool about this movie is the colors. They look great. You sort of don't even see the lines, the colors just sort of take them over. Whoever did the artistic design really knew what they were doing. And once in a while you get some cute comic relief from the little animal friends, but aside from that, there's not much to talk about. Is it really awful? I suppose not. I mean, it's not doing anything god-awful apart from, you know, rewriting history, but hey, history already did that. And it's Disney, you expect them to take horrifying stories and change them around to have a happy ending. But Pocahontas' biggest crime is that it's dull and predictable. Not that Disney has always been unpredictable, but it's always been entertaining. Pocahontas is just a snore fest. Apart from looking at it, there's really not that much to have fun with. We already know what the lesson's gonna be, we already know what the characters are gonna discover, we already know their flaws, their strengths, their weaknesses, we already know who's gonna die, we already know who's gonna live, so why are we watching it? Well, a lot of people didn't. Like I said, this was the first film to start the sort of animated Disney downfall. And even though they'd still have some hits after it, none of them would ever reach the golden age that Disney hit a few years earlier. So while it's not awful, I can see why it started this downward spiral. Disney would need to have a truly ingenious idea for their next film to pull them out of it. The result? Well, join me in the next one.